Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome back to episode 92 of Inspiration Contagion. This week I have my guest, Lisa J. Smith. She is the founder and CEO of Smith Company. She is the premier sales consultant and coach for female and BIPOC business owners. She believes that sales are a catalyst that can transform a business from surviving to thriving. She works every day through consulting, training, and coaching to create radical change and boost revenue. Lisa launched Smith Company in June 2020 as a Covidpreneur. Despite the turbulent economic landscape, she reached six figures in her first year. Having spent 30 years selling professional services in every economic environment imaginable, she has gained many diverse experiences. Lisa profoundly understands her clients' challenges because she's been there herself. All right, I don't know about you guys. I'm excited to talk to Lisa. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you here. I like to always kick our conversation off with one of my favorite questions. And that is, Lisa, what makes you an inspirational leader, or what would you say is your secret sauce?
Yeah, I love this question, Holly. Thank you for asking this. It's such a good way to kick off a conversation and allows people to be a little braggadocious, right? So I would say my secret sauce in my life, in my moment now, because I think you continue to evolve, right? I think my secret sauce is my absolute passion for what I do. It's a 30-year journey to get to where I am today. And I am so jazzed every morning when I get up about what I do. And I think that it's catching. People are always talking about my energy and my passion and my ability to be a cheerleader above and beyond kind of the things that we talk about in our everyday business, environment. So I really do think that that's my secret sauce.
Yes, and I love that word, braggadocious. Isn't it interesting how difficult our world has made it for us to brag and speak about the amazing superpowers we have and the cool things that we're doing?
Yeah.
And yes, I would absolutely say your energy and vitality and authenticity is absolutely part of your secret sauce. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but just kind of getting started, that's definitely part of it. Good stuff.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. I do want to ask you, so I love also figuring out how different people define inspiration. So Lisa, tell us, what does inspiration mean to you?
Yeah, I think earlier in my career, I was a designer. I had a completely different career than I have now. In fact, I've shifted 3 times. And I think that I was always inspired by, and I continue to be inspired by, the creative process itself. People who are doing anything. It doesn't matter whether they're professionals or whether they're amateurs, whether they're crafting or whether they're doing this for a lifelong career. I really love the creative process. And I think having a design degree initially taught me about how important the process is. And I remain inspired by the lessons you can learn along the way. I think sometimes we get so involved at the outcome or what we didn't do, right? Like what we, the whole like should, that's a dirty word in my opinion, that I think that we lose sight of the process can be almost more fun. That's counterintuitive in a capitalist society, but I do think that and it continues to inspire me. And now that I'm a little older, I mean, nature continues to inspire me. I was one of those people during COVID that turned into like the birders during COVID. Like now we look for birds everywhere, which is hilarious. But I just think that it's amazing, right? Like all of these things around us that we take for granted are incredibly
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. And I think there's a lot of value to celebrating and enjoying the journey and the small wins
Mm,
and the progress that you're making along the way. It's interesting. I was actually just on a
hmm.
live stream before this, and we were talking about with goal setting, how a lot of people feel like
Mm,
goals are kind of a dirty word. Like they're afraid of goals. They don't like that. Like they like the word intention instead. And I think that's because
yeah,
corporate America, society, teachers, our education system have kind of put this pressure behind goals. And so we compare ourselves to others. And I think also a lot of times our goals are so aspirational and unrealistic. They're actually trying to achieve an ideal versus something that's
yeah,
realistic. And so, as you were
yeah,
saying, we evolve over time and how we define success changes over time. So I think one, it's
yeah.
what I'm kind of recapping and what I heard you share around inspiration is celebrating your journey, not comparing to others,
Mm,
redefining success
hmm.
on your own terms, and then relishing the small things. Like you said, you got into birding
Hmm.
and all the new little things in nature that are pretty incredible to remind you of how amazing it is to be alive.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
Awesome. I love that. Well, I'd like to shift gears just a little bit. One of the things that I like to ask folks is around peak performance. So,
Hmm.
society, people that have worked in corporate, we've had this tendency to allow other people to define success for ourselves. So, I want to ask you, how do
Hmm.
you define peak performance for yourself in your business? And how did you arrive at this
Hmm.
definition?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because I think that I'll be 4 in June. As you mentioned, I started in 2020. And so it's been an interesting entrepreneurial journey. And I think that I really didn't get my kind of performance ducks in a row, so to speak, until probably the end of last year, where I actually put a plan together and I actually have key performance indicators and I actually try to measure them. As a sole proprietor, I've built an ecosystem of people that I work with, but as a sole proprietor, initially I just thought, well, I'm going to wing it. We're going to see what happens, right? I didn't have any data, so it wasn't really necessary to really try to formalize that. And then I realized kind of quickly, like, that's probably not working for me. And I love data. I learned how much I loved it and what a geek I am about it when went back to school to get my MBA. And I think that there is a place for it without getting kind of analysis paralysis. And I think the way I define it right now, and I'm not great at being consistent at it. I'm working on that piece, but the way I define it right now is just consistently trying to do things week in and week out. So working in a 90-day chunk on the goals, which are, smart um, and driving to a bigger vision, but really trying to consistently measure week in and week out how I'm achieving that, as opposed to, oh, it's an annual goal and I have 12 months to do it. It's a completely different way that I have worked in the past. And I think that when I'm in the zone, it's when I'm really consistent and I'm really clicking. And I will say that the last couple of weeks I haven't been there. so I'm like, I gotta get back. I gotta get back
You mean
there.
you're human? You're not perfect? My goodness. My
Right, Holly.
goodness.
Yeah, I
I have to
agree.
remind myself that I am not superwoman. Sometimes I have that complex. Like it's an old perfectionism thing. So you are also pretty freaking amazing, even if you've been off for 2 weeks. So what I want to
Yeah.
pull out from what you just shared there is a couple of really key things for folks who are listening. One of the mistakes that I see my clients making is not having anything that they're measuring, right? So, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
goals, intentions, all the things, it's still equally important to have data because then you can see
Yeah.
trends. You can see where things are coming. And it's interesting, we were actually talking about this on the live earlier about how people start kind of freaking out in January because they're setting their goals. They lose traction on their goals or their New Year's resolutions. And I think it's fascinating because I've noticed this trend with my clients and people I network with where come December and January, they always freak out and they forget that there can sometimes be a sales slump for certain industries. And it's a very normal part of the cycle because people, guess what? You and your business are not the center of their universe. They have family
Right.
and the holidays, and they're getting ready for the new year. They're feeling the same things you're feeling on a personal level. And so it's so
Right.
funny to me. People think, gosh, my whole year is going to be a hot mess because January has not gone the way I thought it would. And I'm like, have you looked at your data from last year and like the past 10, 20 years you've been in business? What did your January look like then? And they're like, oh, yeah. So guess what, you guys?
Yeah.
Like, data can be reassuring. It can help you show you trends. It can help you see that
Yeah.
what might not feel like success actually was successful. And it can also tell you when you need
Right.
to pivot in the market. So I just wanted to call that out because yes, having data is super important. And I also love that you're measuring in 90-day increments and breaking down the big goals
Yes.
into quarterly things and tracking progress.
Yes.
In fact, there's a really cool tool called the peak formula. I think it's the perfect day formula. And I used to use
Mm.
that for a long time. Now it's kind of just become part of my internal, ingrained in my brain SOP of how I operate daily. And what
Yeah.
I love about it is it helps you start to refine and define how you best work and how to block schedule your time and how to track the perfect day for you as either a sole
Mm-hmm.
proprietor, a CEO, a founder, an author, a speaker, and what that looks like for you so that you can
Mm-hmm.
optimize your efficiencies and have even more peak performance. So keep
Yeah.
doing what you're doing, Lisa. It's amazing stuff.
Thanks.
Now, Lisa, I'm sure, like you said earlier, you're human. I'm sure that you've had some
Mm.
challenges and obstacles. What are some of the biggest challenges and obstacles that you faced over the last 4 years coming to achieve peak performance in your business?
Yeah, well, they've been many. It's an interesting, it is an interesting journey to be an entrepreneur. And I would say that 2023 was a confluence of a bunch of things that came together all at once, which almost crushed the business completely. So there were some external economic forces that I think that caught up to some of the professional services individuals that I serve. And I think that there were some early decisions that I had made as a young consultant that caught up to me. And so it was the perfect storm. So I find that when you, a lot of times when you're first starting out, a couple things. You take any business because you just don't know what it's going to look like, and you're trying to figure it out to get to the point where you can look back and have data, right? So I was taking all kinds of different work. I was trying to figure out my target, which is something that I always coach my clients, like, let's figure out your target. And it took me a long time to kind of get to the fact that, okay, I'm female BIPOC. Like, that is where I really need to spend my time. So that made me inefficient, right? And then I made the mistake of taking on a long-term, very large client. So we're going to have an eggs in a basket situation. And it was not a smart long-term decision for the business because I got further involved in the day-to-day of their business, which took me further away from developing my own sales, right? And so we ended up parting year 2 instead of year 3 for all the right reasons, but it was time to go. And it was an unbelievable then chasm of no work. I had no business development, right? So the inflation rates are high. We didn't have a recession, but I wasn't doing business development. And then, so all these things kind of came together, and I really had to dig deep to try to figure out how am I going to solve this problem. I was so passionate about staying in business, and this was such a big dream of mine to do this, that I didn't want to let it die. But I also had to say, like, hey, there's going to be a tipping point where you're going to have to come to a decision. And if the doors close, and you go do something else. Like, that can't be the end. This is not life or death. It can't be the end of the journey, right? Yes, you're going to work really hard, but be realistic. So luckily, I hit the point and I was turning some things around, thank God. So that didn't have to happen. But I mean, it was it's a struggle. And when you start to see everything's in the red for a really long time, like it's not just like, oh, it's in the red and it dips back up. No, it's in the red for a while, right? It can be a really scary thing. And so I can honestly say when I talk to my clients, like I have faced all of the challenges that you are facing. So I understand not only maybe avenues of how to correct those challenges, but I understand how it feels to be in that space.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the thing that stands in our way is our fear. Our fear is standing in our way.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for being so authentic and open about that, because a lot of people aren't, quite frankly. They just want to put on the smoke and
No,
mirrors and everything's perfect. And those are the ones that I don't want to hire and partner with, because that's not reality. Also, I think it's really important, when you're marketing to your prospective clients, you have to be relatable. You have to be able to understand where they are. And the biggest mistake that I see with people, but when it comes to revenue and performance consulting and marketing, which cuts across all the things for optimizing that realm, they forget to speak in the language of where their people are now, because it's where they
yeah,
used to be and they're not there. And I'm like,
yeah. Oh, that's such a
you have
good
to go
point.
back and meet them where they are and where you were.
Yes,
And that might not feel great because that was in the past and it was like a dark season. But the more you can speak to them where they are, where you used to be, the more likely you'll magnetize and attract the right people. Plus, being open
yeah,
and authentic with how you've been there, they're going to feel
yeah.
more comfortable. Because let's be real, Lisa, when we talk about money, it's uncomfortable. It's like, that's
It's
dirty. That's not
uncomfortable.
sexy.
It's dirty.
Like, ooh,
No,
I don't want to show you behind the curtains of my Excel spreadsheet or my accounting profile, whatever
absolutely.
tool I'm using. Like, that's not comfortable. So it takes a lot of trust to get there.
It does.
Yeah.
It does take that, and I'm so sensitive to that. And so I realize that I know I feel that way, right? So I realize that in my process in getting to know somebody and working on the potential of working together, it is really about, I mean, everyone says B2B selling is about trust, but it is really about establishing, I will be transparent with you and vulnerable with you so you feel like you can do that
Yeah.
with me.
And I would say too that
Yeah,
the work that you and I both do, because it's similar. I mean,
it
I
is.
would say that my clients become not just partners, but friends, because it's kind of hard to do
Yes.
the kind of work we do without getting really close and up close and personal. I mean, it is
Yes,
very personal.
it
Amazing. Well,
is.
I want to ask you, how have you created a culture of peak performance? It sounds like you have some contractors you do some work with, some partnerships. I don't know if you have
Mhm.
employees. So, how have you created that culture of peak performance?
Well, as I mentioned, I am a solopreneur. So although I have contract employees, they're part time. They really are in a consultative nature. So what I'm finding now is that in order for me to stay consistent, is that I am in a couple of different things that allow me to have accountability partners. It's very difficult to hold yourself accountable because you said earlier, so you're so right, we're human and we don't like to do the things we don't like to do. So I think for me, finding accountability partners, I'm part of a group of women who own businesses that we are in a safe space that's curated by some people so that we can talk about the things that are hard to talk about, like we've been talking about today. And I think that creating something where I'm accountable to somebody else, and I know that I have to call in and tell them, like, you're going to ask me if I did it. I'm going to have to tell you that I didn't, and it's not going to feel good. I think that helps me better understand and try to stay in this path that I'm currently mapping out for 2024. And it's hard, I think, for those of us like you and I who are the cheerleaders and the champions of organizations and who are trying to push them forward and help them. It's hard when we are always rallying for others to rally for ourselves. So to also have that accountability partner say, or even for you today, for you to say, like, you're doing great. Like, that helps, because we're not like, I don't pat myself on the back and be like, you did great. Like, that's not what we do, right? So it's both like the hard stuff, like you got to buckle down, but it's also like, hey, I think you're killing it, right? Like, even though I may not feel like I'm killing it at the moment, I think that helps. And I think everybody, when I was a manager, when I had people in a team, and when I was in a bigger organization, I think the thing that was lacking the most in that peak performance was that instant feedback. People were constantly, and an accountability partner can give you that, but people are so reticent to give instant feedback. And it's very difficult to know where you stand if you're waiting for a review that's 6 month or annual, right? And then you feel all the feels. We won't go there. But I think that if you're really communicating effectively on what's going well and what's not going well, those micro adjustments and those kind of like micro negotiations help you stay motivated. But, if you're only looking at things on a 90-day or a 6 month or an annual, I just think it's hard to stay motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say it's not been very long, but I am finally in a place where I am not just a solopreneur and I have some teammates and team members. Yes. And I will say what has been such a blessing is even my assistant will say, gosh, your schedule is so packed, Holly. And, last week you were not at 100%. Do we need to rejigger some things and move your schedule around? And then, we have a win. It's so much more fun to celebrate that with somebody on the team and
Yes,
share with
yes,
them the things. But I would also say that,
yes.
like you were sharing, it's really about building your business tribe and community. So if you are a solopreneur
Mm-hmm,
listening to this and you're not ready to hire somebody on your team, it's creating
mm-hmm.
trusted partners that you can go to for advisement, for accountability, for celebrating. Because, quite frankly, my friendships and my family, they don't get it. They really don't. They love me, they support me, they're massive fans of what I'm doing, but they don't understand when it is in the red for a while and I'm freaking out. Or, like, last week, I'll say, oh, it's great. And then the next week I'm like, gosh, everything's falling apart. What am I doing? And they're like, well, I don't
Yeah,
understand the roller coaster you're on because I thought you just said it was great. So it's
right.
having those business people that can lift you up and remind you of the fact that you're not alone in this game. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So one of the other questions I want to ask you is, so how have you optimized your customer experience to reflect peak performance for them?
Yeah, this is a fascinating question, Holly. And as I was thinking about this, preparing for today, I think I am now doing more to offboard my clients as much as I am to onboard them. So I'm leveraging better technology in the onboarding process to streamline it for them and make it effortless, right? Because I think we are going to be talking about some heavy topics and a lot of money and doing a lot of homework and things up front. But I'm finding that it's just as important to offboard clients as they are, as we're finishing up our journey together, to gather data about what I can continue to improve. And because they are the ones who are going to have the best perspective. I can guess, but again, it goes back to data, right? I can guess all day long, and we are having conversations as we're meeting weekly or every other week. But to ask them in a quiet space, and I do a survey, and to say, like, I really want you to be honest. What can I do better? If we were to work together again, what would you expect to see from me? What would be elevated? It's been really insightful because there have been things that I'm not even thinking of that they've come back with me. Here's a really interesting piece. Because I'm in sales all the time and I'm a junkie and I love it. Like you, I love it. Everything about it is just interesting, and I just want to continue to learn more and help my clients achieve their results. Sometimes I just get into all of the sales terminology and the sales speak. And one of my clients said, this is really new to me. I was in a very different role previous to now being an entrepreneur, and I need you to like bring it down a notch. And I thought, Oh, that's really valuable advice, because I'm up here in my head, and and I, to your point earlier, like meeting someone where they're at, like I really want to be conscious of that. I don't want anyone to feel like I'm talking down to them or being patronizing. I'm just so excited about all these things, right? So I think that that is really helping me better uh, better solve the problems and challenges that we're working on together in a way that's helpful, and it's keeping me on track, because I know that I'm delivering what ultimately they want. So that's helped a lot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a great reminder. And actually, you're the first person who's brought up offboarding their customers. That's so interesting that nobody's
Oh,
brought this up because ultimately, I mean, of course, you want to keep your customers for life if you can, but
yeah,
only in a way where it's a
right.
win-win across the board. Now, when you are offboarding them, I love getting that data, the data points of kind of an exit survey, an exit interview to get real
Yes,
time feedback and real time perspective from them. That is super important, like super, super valuable. So I'm so grateful you brought that up because the experience for your customer starts
yes,
from before they become a client to post client. And you really want to make sure that that's a supportive experience. That can be really scary if they've worked with you for 6 months or a year, or for some of them, like 5 years. And what's really interesting too is from my offboarding stuff that I've worked on with clients, it's actually opened up opportunities for new packages I hadn't considered. So like I have a maintenance package.
yes, that too.
I'm like,
Yes,
they're like, hey, can
yes,
you just do
exactly.
this part for me ongoing? Like I just want introductions, or I just want like a monthly 30-minute check-in. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
of course. We can do a maintenance package around that. So when you listen to your people, it solves the problems in your market without market research because they're your people. So yeah,
absolutely,
big ninja
absolutely.
tip from Lisa today. Amazing. So we're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about revenue.
Money. Okay, I love
So
it.
Lisa, when have you left money on the table and what did you do to fix it?
Okay, the classic problem. I do this with every single client that I work with. They don't ask for it, we do it anyway, because this is a kicker. I work in B2B, so I work with clients who sell professional services, and I have been selling professional services for 30 years. So I know the model really well. And what I discovered was a formula. I didn't discover it until I started my business, by the way. This burdened hourly rate formula, where when you look at something initially from a cost perspective, did you account for in your hourly rate overhead and all of your expenses before you added profitability? And so everyone I find is hemorrhaging money between the right gross revenue and net profit, because they're not realizing that they are not accounting for in their hourly rate, which, even if they're not billing hourly, if they're selling a package, everything is based on some sort of cost, time for, service. They're not realizing that they are leaking. And so when I found this, I've been introduced this concept earlier, but when I started my business and I was the one now who was, trying to determine my hourly rate and figuring it out and having some experience under my belt, I found this and I went, oh, I'm finally going to nail this. I've been trying to solve this for 10 years. This is going to nail it. And it inevitably it does. So I did it for myself. I do it for all of my clients. And the great thing about it is there are several levers within the formula that you can pull, and you can do it for every employee, so that, if you do have a team of employees, you as an owner, you're not going to be as billable if you bill time than your employees, who, because you're doing sales, you're doing administration, you're doing management, you're doing HR, you're doing all those things that are non-billable. You're going to be less billable than your team, who can be more billable because they're not spending time on that. You can account for that then in your revenues. You can account for the benefits you want to give your employees. You can account for that before profitability. And then when you add profitability, you will see that number in your net profits. And so when I solve that, I will give that. I have a presentation. I talk about it all the time. And then we talk about value. Let's talk about cost versus value. And then adding, profitability and making sure that the value you're creating for your clients, you're actually capitalizing on. That's a whole other way of thinking. Not just cost. Was it cost me to deliver the service? So when I nailed that, it was like the skies open and the sun starts shining like manna from heaven, right? Because it's like, oh, I can see it. I can prove it now. I can prove I'm covering my expenses in my hourly rate and not leaking profit. It's such a you can tell I'm passionate about it. It's transformative in my opinion.
No, I love this too because I can't stand it when you provide like the investment point and like you share what's included in like a package, for example, and the person says, so wait, if I break this down hourly, it's this. And I'm like, yeah, that's not how this works. And then I have to,
Not
I
at
have to
all.
value stack and explain it. Usually that kind of person's not my ideal client because
Yes, me
I'm like, if
either.
you're gonna really get that nitty gritty, this is not really a fit. But sometimes
Right.
people that are my ideal client, if I answer it kind of high level, they're like, oh, that makes total sense. Thank you for explaining that. So I do answer it. But then the people that go really, I'm like, yeah, this is not a fit. But best of luck. Here's somebody else I can
Yeah.
introduce you to.
Exactly. Yes, I call that a graceful release. I'm gracefully going to release you, and I can refer you to somebody else who's going to
Yeah,
solve your problem.
exactly. And that's the thing is if you ultimately value stack and speak to the pain points of the person you're helping and build that trust and confidence in them that you can solve this together,
Right.
it's really just, do they have the finances? Do they have the faith and the belief? Do they have the right chemistry with you to say yes? If they do, it doesn't matter how
Yes.
much it costs, as long as the pain
No.
point is big enough and they have like the right investment to do that, they're gonna make. I have had
Exactly. Yep.
clients that literally put their payments on multiple credit cards to work with me because they knew I could help solve
Yep.
their problem. Not that I'm saying you should do that,
Yep.
but if you really believe in your
Nope.
business, make it
Nope.
happen, like believe in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do have to take a leap of faith, especially with revenue generation and sales and marketing. You do have to take a leap of faith, and you have to be willing
Yeah.
to change. That's one of the biggest things that I look for is like, are you willing to make a change? Because what got you here is not going to get you there, right? Like status quo is not going to solve your problem. So are you willing to make the change? And so I think that pain plus change equals
Well, and I also
results.
think if you're not willing to invest a solid amount into your money, into your business of your own
Mm.
investment, then you're not ready to sell a big program to somebody. I mean, I
Yeah,
remember some
yeah.
of the big investments I made early into my business was way before I was charging that much in my business. And now it's like easy. It's like, cool, that's going to be $25,000. It's the investment for that. And they're like, yeah, where do I do that?
Yeah.
Cool. One lump sum and a payment, like
Yeah.
one lump sum's great. So you have to practice being that person of the future to be successful in sales. But we could go all day on that.
Yep. We could.
Lisa, I want to ask you, what is the next shiny object that you want to turn into revenue?
That is a really interesting question because I've been playing around with this. So initially in 23, I thought, like many consultants are doing now, it's going to be curriculum, and it's going to be a DIY version. And for those of the individuals, especially startups, who need this information but can't afford my services, it's going to be that. It's not that. It's not that. I will tell you, I don't have a good answer right now. I'm in between figuring out what needs to be that additional revenue stream. There's speaking and there's the consulting and coaching, but I don't know what it should be. And I don't want to necessarily just follow what everyone else is doing unless it's a good fit for me. But I do know that, the only way to grow and expand as a solopreneur is I need to have passive income. At some point, there needs to be, that passive income. And I think after coming off of such a rough 23, my goal is just, let's build revenue. Let's just get that lock solid. But I'm really trying to figure that out. I don't have the answer for the magic wand.
So I would say two ideas for you to ponder. Number one, this seems to be the year of partnerships for passive income. And by the way, I have some people to introduce you to for that will be great partners for you. So remind me after this to do that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And then the second thing is you kind of answered it in your interview. Why don't you go back to your offboarding surveys to see if there's a commonality for your next thing?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I like that idea. Yes. Done. I'm going to go do that, Holly.
And then come back and tell us about it. All right.
Okay.
Lisa, this has been great. We're going to wrap up with two closing questions. The first one is, what is the best one piece of advice you would share with others today?
The one piece I'm going to share is related to sales. We're going to stick on the theme today. It's not going to be personal. It was related to sales. It's that fear is the enemy. And I stand in fear as much as everyone else. But if you can really, sometimes it's unconscious, if you can really be honest about what it is that is holding you back, you can remove that limitation and succeed. And that can talk about everything in your life, not just in sales, but there are so many things about sales that so many people fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear sometimes of success. Like that's a whole other version of fear, right? There's so many of them. If you can the fears aren't going to go away, but if you can be honest about those fears and you can minimize them to a point where then you can easily overcome them. It's just a mindset shift. But you have to be willing to say, all right, it's not that I don't have a process. It's not that I don't have enough time. It's not all these things. It's that I'm afraid of this thing. So how can I move around that? I would say that would be my biggest takeaway and piece of advice.
I love it. And actually, for those of you who are like, how do I do that? There's a TED Talk I did on that. That's on the fear method that you should check out. Love it, Lisa.
Yes.
Love it. And my last question for you, what is the legacy you wish to leave behind?
I love this question too. My goal in 10 or 15 years, or by the time I'm gone, would be my whole mission is to really look around the economic landscape and see more businesses that don't look like me. I want to be the minority. I do not want to see a lot more people like me. I want to see the incredible, robust diversity that is available, that is succeeding, that is excelling, that is going beyond. That would be, if I could have any part of making that reality happen, I would have done what I was put on this earth to do, for sure. That is totally my mission, to see especially women, but female and BIPOC businesses just take over and exceed and thrive. And I mean, that would be amazing.
I love that vision. And I believe you're going to have some pretty positive momentum and impact in that. Well, Lisa, this has been a delight. Thank you so much for joining and sharing so many nuggets of wisdom and ninja tips for our audience. For those of you who are interested in following Lisa or working with Lisa, I will have her website link as well as her LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube links in the show notes and the YouTube video notes. So please feel free to reach out to Lisa. She is wonderful. We are talking some collaboration magic too. So she's extra special if that's the case. Make sure you chat with Lisa and follow Lisa. All right, that wraps up our interview today. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Oh, thank you for your time, Holly. It's just been such a joy.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, we'll see you on our next episode. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.